At another episode of the Never Again Live podcast with Meir Halevi Weinstein. We have some guests with us tonight. If any of you saw a meme circulating that we're live from Israel, that was my anticipation. We will be live from Israel sometime in 8 or 10 hours. But for now, we're live from the airport in Toronto, as well as from New Orleans and from Calgary and from South Texas. So without any further ado, let's start tonight's program. Please, if you haven't joined us before, join us on our YouTube channel, on Facebook, and on our website, israelnow.ca, and help us support Israel and fight anti-Semitism. For all of you who might not be aware, that this is the official annual Israeli Apartheid Week, where BDS and college campuses all over the world celebrate the non-existent Israeli apartheid and continue to pass their propaganda and lies regarding the state of Israel. And our goal is certainly to defeat all their lies and to try to circulate the truth. We're also going to talk this evening, again, about an update on Ukraine, as well as we mentioned last week, the amazing Israeli pipeline, which is actually no longer a pipe dream, it's a pipe reality. We have some special guests with us this evening, which we'll introduce more formally in a little while. But we've got Ronnie's joining us again, who's from Jerusalem. He's an unapologetic Zionist, and he's also the publishing director of the main source of Zionist, Israeli, and Jewish news, both locally, nationally, and globally, coming from Canada. We have Ryan Bellerose going to join us a little later, who's actually a Metis from the Metis tribe of Alberta, and he's a self-proclaimed Zionist because he understands the common issues affecting Native Americans and Jews. And joining us once again is Jesse Edberg, who's a spokesman for the Religious Zionist Youth Party. He's president of Tulane University, and he does plan to make Aliyah after his graduation. So speaking about apartheid and the BDS movement and its infiltration on college campuses. Oh, by the way, that's me hiding out in the corner here in the studio. This plague of anti-Semitism spreading throughout campuses, particularly in North America, is particularly frightening and persistent. Now they're trying to defund Hillel at universities, and Duke University and Rutgers.
The Rutgers professor is accused of posting anti-Semitic sentiments on social media, and he's been removed from his position as a director at the school. Michael Chikindas was a director of the Center for Digestive Health. Since his statements on Facebook, he has been barred from teaching courses and is required to take cultural sensitivity training courses. The university.
Interesting. He is from the Department of Digestive Health. Makes you kind of want to throw up.
The university is also looking at additional disciplinary action through the faculty union. The Rutgers professor is.
Oh, I already said that. Next page. Calling for the defunding of Hillel at Rutgers University. And no more kosher food is another push. And here's a nice little pep rally, probably before one of their football games. As we always try to keep in mind, the world's a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. We always start our programs with a little bit of Torah. And we have Meir is going to give us a little bit of history on the Parsha of the week. So help us fight anti-Semitism at israelnow.ca. And here's Meir with the Parsha of the week. Take it away, Meir.
Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be with you. I'm going to ask everyone who's joining us tonight if you could please share this with the different social media platforms that you use, be it Facebook, be it Twitter, Instagram. We'd appreciate it. We'll get the word out. We'll reach a lot more people. Also, we'll do our best to address any questions that you have tonight on our active chat that we have. So whatever your questions are or comments, no problem. We'll do our best to address it. Right now, I'm going to talk about the Parsha and how it relates to what we're going to be discussing. But where I am right now is at the Israeli terminal in Toronto, and I'm going to be boarding a plane in a couple hours heading to Israel, the land of the Jewish people. It is, it says in the Torah, the land of milk and honey. There's absolutely no question about it. It's unbelievable. And it's a blessing for the Jewish people in so many ways. And there's approximately 7 million Jews living in Israel right now. It's the largest Jewish community in the entire world. Who would think of it? People used to think that the largest Jewish community is in the United States and the center of Judaism is in New York City. That's not the case. The center of Judaism is Jerusalem, and that's where it's all happening. And Jews are learning that time is short. And the Jews of the Ukraine, I don't think they thought that they would be fleeing now. They're able to take with them maybe a suitcase with them and go to Israel. They never thought that. It's a warning sign for Jewish communities throughout the world that maybe it's time to make some plans to have dual citizenship, to be able to be in Israel and run your business outside of Israel as well. A lot of people have adapted during the Corona pandemic as well. And a lot of people are thinking about moving to Israel because of the Corona pandemic, that they saw how Israel handled it better than so many in the entire world. This week's Parsha is Parsha Tzev. And in this Parsha, we talk about the korbanot, the burnt offerings that were taking place in the Mishkan as the Jewish people left Egypt and traveled in the wilderness. They built the Mishkan. And it says in the Parsha that there was to be a fire burning. We would always have to bring the priesthood would bring wood into the Mishkan, and it was continuous because there had to be a fire that would be continuous. And when the offering was brought in there, the sacrifice, the fire would take care of it. But what would happen at the same time, simultaneously, according to the sages, was that there was a fire that came from the heavens, from Shemayim, and it would devour it would descend and devour the offering, the korban. So there's an obvious question that's asked, and the question really is, if God is sending a fire to devour the offering, what is the need for us, for the Jewish people, to make a fire in the first place anyways, in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle? And the answer is that that's the major principle of Judaism, of Torah, that you have to take action. And if you don't take that action, it's not going to happen. There isn't going to be a fire from Shemayim. There's another classic example. It says that the Beis Hamikdash, there's a Beis Hamikdash in the heavens, waiting to descend into Jerusalem on the Temple Mount, with the specifications how it's supposed to be. But it doesn't descend just like that. The Jewish people have to build it, have to physically build the temple, and then it comes down from heaven. It infuses itself. It is the soul of the temple. And that's what happens from this relationship that the Jewish people have with God. We do our part. God does his part. When the Jewish people built the Mishkan, they left Egypt. They left the evilness and the cruelty of Egypt. And when they were offering the sacrifices in the Mishkan, this was to elevate. It was always to elevate, even if it was a wheat offering, not an animal offering, even if it was wheat or a lot of different offerings that have nothing to do with animals. Everything was to elevate. When we say a bracha over our food, we're trying to elevate. So when the Jews left the cruelty of Egypt, the Jewish people are trying to elevate. And they were marching towards Israel under the leadership of Joshua, who took them into the land of Israel. We have problems today. Only 3 years after the Holocaust, the Jewish established the state of Israel. We suffered the worst form of cruelty. And instead of making some kind of a peace deal with the Jewish people, the Arab armies, the Arab countries surrounded Israel and attacked Israel. And they were quite open about what their intentions were, to annihilate and finish the job of Hitler. The Jewish people won. And there's been more wars than just the 1948 war. But always the Jewish people win. Israel has won, has been victorious. And the Jewish people extend the hand for peace. Always. Side note, there is the Abraham Accords. There is hope going on. But what's my point? My point is that we're facing an onslaught on campuses throughout North America and the world. It's called Israeli Apartheid Week. You have organizations that are so twisted in their anti-Semitism against the Jewish people that small little tiny Jewish state in the Middle East that comprises 0.006% of the land in the Middle East, that's too much for them. They say Jews should have no sovereignty. In fact, that's what Amnesty International, who's trying to attack Israel and wants Israel to be tried before the ICC, that's what they say. They say that the Jewish people have no right to sovereignty in the Middle East, that everybody else has rights like that. All these Muslim countries, all these Arab countries, they have rights. Christian countries throughout the world, they have rights. Chinese, they have rights. Japanese, they have rights. The Jewish people have no rights. That's what they say. Our job is to speak the truth and to be strong in our faith and stare down the anti-Semites and call them out exactly what they are. But just think for a moment, like internalize this. 0.006% of the Middle East, that's the state of Israel. And that's too much for them. And they call themselves human rights activists. They're anything but. They are the epitome of anti-Semitism. They want to finish what Hitler started. We have great guests with us tonight. And the doctor could call them out in whatever order he chooses to, and we'll talk about it. Jesse is active on campuses. He sees what's
Giving me
going
the
on.
power. That might be dangerous. Let's see. Okay, so do you have any preference, or should I just put them in order of how they appeared with us? Well, certainly the first one who joined us this evening was Jesse, so we'll get Jesse up there. And for anybody who's not familiar with Jesse, he's been on before, but just so know a little about him. Jesse's the late addition to tonight's show. We just found about it this morning. He's a spokesman for the Religious Zionist Party Youth. He's currently studying political science at Tulane University and plans to make Aliyah after graduation. And we just refer to him as Jesse the Mensch.
I appreciate it. So it looks like to me, from where I'm standing, that there's two problems on college campuses. I think of it as a hot problem and a cold problem. The hot problem is this kind of BDS hate that we get from outside groups into the Jewish students. The cold problem is the problem from within. It's the difference of Jewish students towards their own heritage, towards their own peoplehood. And we could ask, like we asked after the Holocaust, why is this happening? Why are we getting this hate from without? And we could turn to Rav Soloveitchik, the founder of Yeshiva University, and he said in his famous speech, Kol Dodi Dofek, he said that the reason that we get trials and tribulations as an individual level and as a people is so we could go from a subject of fate to an object of destiny. So we could take these Jews and we could take them just from being, oh, I'm a Jew by choice. I'm a Jew because my mom happened to be Jewish, and sometimes I go to shul, sometimes no, to Jews by choice, Jews by chance to Jews by choice. So we really take the heat and use it to thaw out the cold. That's what we need to be doing. And these people that turn up the heat, these people that try to get kosher food banned, that openly incite against Jewish students on campuses, they'll say it's just about Israel. It's just about Israel. And they're right. They're right. It is just about Israel. But what they don't tell you is that Israel isn't just a country. And it's not even just a land. It's not just Medina Israel. It's not just Eretz Israel. It's a people. It's Am Yisrael. And it's a substantive culture. It's Torah Israel. And when they say this is about Israel, we don't like Israel, they're right. They don't like the country. They don't like the land. They don't like the people, and they don't like the Torah. And they try to hide behind it, but at the same time they're hiding, they're revealing their true intentions straight and forward.
How severe do you see the Israeli Apartheid Week, let's say, on the campus setting up right now? What are you hearing?
So, the most recent thing that I heard kind of in the lead up to Apartheid Week, I have a lot of friends at Vanderbilt in Nashville, and they recently had Rudy Rochman come in. A lot of people are familiar with Rudy Rochman. He's about the most white bread, inoffensible, well, unless you're Jewish, inoffensible kind of guy you could bring onto a college campus. But even so, people cherry picked his quotes from the speech. He's a person who got imprisoned, unfortunately, by the Nigerian government. And people were cherry picking his quotes, saying he hates black people and he hates Muslims, which, if you even listen to an iota of what he says, it couldn't be further from the truth. If anything, he's too peacenik, he's too kind, he's too soft-handed, and that comes across if you actually listen. But no, these jackals are so eager to hate Israel, and they'll tell it, they'll say it straight out, we hate Israel, not just the country, but the land, the people, and the Torah, that they're willing to use anything, anyone, to cause a fuss, to put Chabad under fire, to put all the Jewish students of Vanderbilt under fire, and all the Jewish students in college campuses across the country.
Right. Can we bring Ryan on as well? Ryan has been pretty active throughout the years on combating Israeli Apartheid Week.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Ryan, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Can you hear me, or do I need to turn it up?
I can hear you.
No, we can hear you.
Good.
I can hear you.
Yeah, when I used to get involved a lot on campus, I noticed two things. One, whenever we brought up Apartheid Week, everybody wanted to fight it with like kind words, and like everybody's ideas were never to be confrontational. And I think that's the biggest mistake we made. Like the first thing we should have done, the very first Apartheid Week, I think it was back in 2001. And that was like, I was still in university, so I didn't even really know much about it. And I remember going to school, and they had put up this paper mache wall across the doorway. So when I walked up to the doorway, there's this paper mache wall, and it's got bloody handprints on it, and it's all painted. And I said, I got to get to my class. It's on the other side of the door there. So you guys got to move your little wall here. And one of the guys walks up to me. He's a little 5 foot tall Arab guy. And he says, you need to understand the oppression of the Palestinians. And I looked at him and I said, dude, I'm an Indian in Canada. What the hell are you talking about? Like, if anybody knows about oppression, it's us. I'm not walking all the way around for you to get your jollies about this. I was like, take your damn wall out of my way, or I'll take it down. And the funny part was, when I talk to Jewish kids, I mean, you look at the most effective ways of fighting this, and you look at like Columbia University a couple years ago. Instead of trying to argue all of their points because you're just going to get people fatigued, they got a great big inflatable Pinocchio, and they put it up, and they said, apartheid lies weak. And this is how you do it. I think you start bringing up things like, hey, why is it that there's so much child abuse and animal abuse in the Palestinian territories? Instead of us trying to constantly defend Israel and justify everything, which I think has a place, but it's not always effective. Sometimes you have to go on the offensive. And I think especially on campus, a lot of young Jewish people are really, they don't feel empowered. They don't feel backed up by the large organizations. They don't feel like they have any kind of support in order to do that. And that's why you're seeing, I believe, that's why you're seeing these groups growing so quickly, like JVP and J Street U and all these idiot groups. In Canada, we've got CJPME. They're growing so quickly, especially in the young Jewish community, because they tell these kids, you don't have to be apologetic. Look, you can help change the world. Yeah, you're on the wrong side of history and you're actually actively helping fight against the Jewish people, but they feel like they're part of the fight. I mean, the sad part is they become the enemy of the Jewish people, but they feel like they're important and supported. Now, if we started supporting young Zionist students and started educating them and started giving them empowerment and support, you would start seeing these kids being a lot more comfortable standing up to this idiocy. You said, sorry, the young guy here, you're going to Tulane, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple years ago, I spoke there at a thing they called Declare Your Freedom. It was a festival organized by Meir Shapira and a girl named Chloe Valdery. And all it was a music festival. And it was a music festival where we put a little bit of Zionist messaging in it. We had Matisyahu came and played. I mean, it was pretty wild. But there were actually people protesting it. And the funny part was they weren't protesting the fact that we were talking about Zionism. They were protesting the fact that we had Jewish Israeli IDF veterans speaking at the thing. So I mean, like if we're smart about this stuff, we can make things happen. We can affect change. But the problem is, I honestly believe we're not fighting this intelligently. We're not empowering young people like you. We're not giving you guys the tools and support that you need. And then we act all shocked when BDS is going insane. And it's been demonstrated. Every single campus where BDS is brought up has a steep rise in anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic attacks, anti-Semitic events. And it's been proven. And we know that a lot of times they don't even care if they win, like if they're trying to push a BDS motion. They don't care if they win. They just want the opportunity to spread a little bit more Jew hate. And if they lose, they just get more opportunities to do it again. And I think that's where we're kind of losing as a community. That's where we're losing this fight, is that we haven't understood that, look, to them, it's not about, like, BDS is not about winning those motions. It's just about spreading Jew hate. And the more Jew hate they can spread, the better it is for them.
Well, they hate Israel, and they're very upfront about that. And I think,
oh, dude, it's not even, you know what? If it was just about Israel, and I like, this is the thing. They all say the exact same stuff. Well, it's just Israel because Israel's so bad. It's the Israeli government. But then why are they protesting kosher food? What the hell does kosher food in Canada on campus have to do with Israel?
But, you know what? Let's bring Ron onto the mix also. This Ron. There's Ron.
There I am.
Okay.
There I am. Okay. Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me again on the show. I have to tell you that if we're waiting until university to empower and support and influence and educate our youth, to defend themselves, we've missed the boat and we've lost the battle. I have a kid now who's in grade 10, and trust me, his education about Israel, about Judaism, about being confident in who he is, about understanding what the issues are, about being able to have talking points that he can go with, has been started, when he was much younger. So that today, in grade 10, he is ready to go to battle with anybody who might challenge him about his identity, about being Israeli, about being Jewish. He's proud of who he is. He's proud of his heritage, but he also knows the history and the talking points, and he's able to stand there and have a very profound argument with anybody who would want to tell him something about Israel being an apartheid state. I wish that more people within our community, and again, I go back to our community leadership on this, would start at a much younger age to educate their children, about being proud of their Jewish heritage, about the history of Judaism, about the history of Israel, about understanding the meaning of the word apartheid, about understanding what anti-Semitism is, what Jew hate is, understanding how anti-Zionism is just another word for anti-Semitism, so that when they go to university, that they already have the foundation, at least, by which they can start. There's not too many Jesses out there in the world right now who have the kind of education, ideology, and belief behind them that can go into university and feel confident enough to challenge many of these BDS groups and many of these self-hating Jewish groups. And I think that's part of the problem. What you're seeing is a lot of Jewish students going to university who do not have a strong enough foundation on which they can stand and defend. And because they don't have that foundation, it's much easier to either be quiet, to segue to the other side, because the other side is providing you their arguments, but there's nobody on the other side that has done that for you previously. So I think we need to look at this as an education that needs to happen much younger. And I'll tell you that the people who are doing the Apartheid Week at university have already figured it out. Meir, for yourself in Toronto, the spike of anti-Semitism at high school and at junior highs, it's coming down to that level. They're already prepping the kids at that young age. If we don't do the same thing, if we don't recognize that we need to build a foundation at a much younger age, the battle is lost. By the time we get to university, it's just too late.
Oh yeah, that's why like I'm involved with a group called Club Z in the States, and it was started literally by a Russian Jewish woman who decided that her son came home from school one day and started telling her, "Hey mom, so I just learned all this stuff about Israel," and he just basically gave her a whole big spiel about all the anti-Israel nonsense he was being taught, and he didn't know any better. I mean, the one thing about Russian Jews, they usually have a strong Zionist identity, but they don't usually have a huge grounding in Jewish Jewish thought or Jewish history. And she was in shock, and so she left her job as a nurse to start this group, and it's grown over the last couple of years. But we still don't have something like that in Canada, and we need something like that here, because I'll tell you, there's nothing worse for me as just a normal person to go to an event that has nothing to do with Jews or Israel, and it usually has to do with indigenous rights or something to do with my people, and some idiot gets up on the stage and starts comparing their struggle to the struggle of the Native American. And it's incredibly frustrating for somebody like me, because I'm like, wait a second, we're not the conquering colonizers that forced our way of living on other people. That was the people that came here. And that's the Arabs in the Middle East. Like, they need to understand, the Arabs in the Middle East are literally analogous to white people in North America. They conquered and colonized the entire area, forced their alien religion on other people. Like, we need to educate these people, and we need people to understand the reality here, because I mean, that's the worst part of this argument, and it's the part that I see most often.
And you know what I would add to your point? I would say, I mean, you point out Arab colonization of the Middle East. There's no question about that. Or Islamic conquest. There's no question about that. And you look at it, that I think that it doesn't dawn on a lot of Jews, on a lot of Jewish students, the reality that Israel comprises 0.006% of the Middle East. So
Exactly.
there's like a shock when some Islamic student smiles, like an Ilhan Omar smiles and says, "Why is Israel doing this to the Palestinians? Don't you have ethics in your Torah? Don't you?" Like, they're disarmed. They're thinking, this is completely out of left field. And then they don't even know how to answer it. So there's a shock effect that goes into effect. But the reality
100%.
is, this is our roots. This is where we're from. We don't have aspirations for Saudi Arabia or this country or that country or the other country. We came back to our country, and we want to make a peace with everyone that surrounds the country. We'd like to. But this belongs to us. This little sliver of land is ours. And you could ask any Baptist in the world also. He reads the Bible, and it says that. And in history, it's all there. And legally, it's all there. And when it comes down to indigenous rights, We were here. We have all the artifacts. We have all the history. We had kings. We had
Yep.
the temples there. And they deny it all. Then they try and really floor you, and you really, a Jewish student is going to scratch his head when some Islamic scholar says Jesus was a Muslim. King Solomon was a Muslim. Moses was a Muslim. And they're going, I really want to get along with this person, but, right? You get the, it's disarming when they do this.
Well, this
I'll
is
tell
like
you-
Jesse can probably
truth.
probably tell you guys. Yeah, I was going to say Jesse can probably tell you guys. He's actually in school. Like, how difficult is it, Jesse, to go against the stream when you're in university? I mean, because pretty much all of university life is about going along to get along. You got to get your degree. You don't want to disagree too much with the professor, because if you say something that goes directly against what he says, you might not get a good grade, right?
Well, I mean, luckily for me, I go to a school that's 35% Jewish. And when, usually people are very chill and very relaxed and very easygoing. But when you irritate the Jewish spirit, they typically come back. And it's very nice to see a lot of the time. And it's important to point out that the stuff we're dealing with, it's not just, oh, I think Israel has this policy point and really it should have that policy point. It's not even just, well, the original Jew, like the King David was a Muslim or black or something and not really Jewish, and you're actually Khazars. It's not just that either. Oftentimes, inevitably, it comes to Viva Viva Intifada. Jews are genociders. Jews are baby killers. And when it comes to that point, we all like tolerance and we all like diversity and we all like dialogue and all these buzzwords. But at that point, it's incitement. And Jewish students have to know that incitement is not the fun conversation you have in social studies. It's not a good faith argument. It's a threat to your life, and it's something that should be responded to in kind. And that's something that Jewish students not only aren't empowered in most cases for the historical errors that people make.
Live show.
Not just not empowered for the.
But if I need to, my boarding pass is here.
Not empowered for the incitement that goes on. That really hurts to see a lot of the time.
I'm just flying to Israel.
Hey, Meir, can you mute yourself? Meir.
So one of you said, like, there's not a lot of Jewish students that are willing to put their neck out. And I think we're going to see a lot more. The more the heat gets turned up, the more the pressure gets turned up, we're going to see a lot of diamonds come out of the rough.
Yeah, that's what I hope too.
I'll tell you one thing. We keep on mentioning Jewish students under this assumption that Jewish students are a group of students who get their education or the formative education in some kind of a Jewish atmosphere under a Jewish umbrella, where actually the majority of Jews, the vast majority of Jews in North America, don't get any kind of Jewish education whatsoever. The education they get about the Judaism is whatever their parents might have gotten, from their parents and where they were. That is one of the problems that we don't address when we talk about Apartheid Week, or the inability of Jewish students to defend themselves when they go to university. They never face this kind of a situation. They've never been prepared for this kind of a situation, not during their formative years at school and not at home. So when they end up at university, a lot of times it's a shell shock kind of an atmosphere. I have not been educated about this. It's one thing to light candles on Hanukkah. It's one thing to eat matzah on Pesach. It's one thing to read the Seder. That's one thing. It's a complete other thing to understand the meaning of all of it, the history, the background, what it means. So many Jewish students don't know about the Holocaust, about how many Jews died, how many children died, where they died, why it happened, how it happened. We were talking about Israel being only 0.006% of the Middle East. But when you show a kid a map of Israel, in their mind's eye, they think it's the same size as where they live. So they think of it as Canada, or they think of it as the United States. And it's difficult for them to understand that it's a tiny little, area in a much bigger space. You and I understand. Ryan understands. Jesse understands. My issue, my problem is, where are we as a community to capture our own children when they're young? And I'll tell you, When we first moved here 100 years ago, when we needed our community, when we were very insular, when we were a small community, where we depended on each other, there was that formative education. You went to synagogue. That's where you met your community. You went to Jewish school. You did all those things. But as the years have gone, as we've started to assimilate, for lack of a better word, within our society, those things became less important for us as a community, as Jews. It became more important to have non-Jewish friends, to make sure you assimilate into the non-Jewish community.
Well, yeah,
you
Ron, that's for every group, though. Ron,
no, but
every
what,
group has that same thing.
Hold on,
I'm just saying, every group has that same thing. Remember, we talked about this. Comfort is the enemy of identity.
But what
and Jews in Canada and the United States are comfortable, so they don't fight for this stuff.
There's one difference. There's one group that does not assimilate to the same level, has not assimilated to the same level. That's why they have the strength that they have, and that is the Muslim communities. They have been here as long as the Jewish community has been here, if not longer in some cases, yet they do not assimilate to the same level as the Jewish community is assimilated. That's why, in many cases, you see them having better talking points, because they still attend the mosque, they still attend after-school programs, they still attend community programs. It's much different from Jewish people. I just saw Purim here in Winnipeg. If you'd see how many people showed up to the Purim celebration here in Winnipeg, of a community of 16,000, 17,000 people, you'd understand why there's a problem. Because only 200 people show up, maybe 300. The majority are new immigrants who moved to Winnipeg recently. The regular community is not involved. And they're not involved because they're not part of the community in any fashion, not at school, not at the graded JCC, which is our local JCC, not anywhere. Then we expect those students to become our ambassadors and our defenders at university. We miss them. I mean, you can't expect that out of them. It's not fair to them.
Well, yeah, they don't feel like they're part of the community, so why would they defend it?
So we need to have a look from within the community of how do we capture them back? How do we bring them back into the community? How do we do the things that that you do, Ryan, with the younger groups in the United States? But then we need to measure the effect of it. Who's showing up to those events? Is it people who are already pro-Israel, or is it people that really want to learn and become proactive and become part of the Jewish community? That's the question I have. When and it's a question I have for Meir all the time.
I'll put you in contact with Masha, because I've seen the change, because I started speaking at it. I believe I spoke at the second one the first time 6 years ago, and I'll tell you the difference that I see. Like you see young people there that are genuinely knowledgeable and empowered. I was totally taken aback. So, but I mean, there's so many things that we have to talk about. I mean, this is the problem. The other side has a really simple narrative: Jews are bad. So everything they do boils down to Jews are bad. Right. And meanwhile, we're trying to fight back with all of these different things that we talk about. We talk about, Israeli tech. We talk about Jewish thought. We talk about Torah principles. And I mean, they have such a simple argument, and we're trying to fight it with all these other ones. That's why I keep trying to tell people, look, like we have to dial it back a bit, because we're trying to pour, like the way I teach it when I'm teaching kids, I take a water bottle and then I take a cup, and I say, what's easier? Taking this cup of water and dumping it all onto the bottle, and then a little bit of that water gets into the bottle, or taking the bottle and pouring it into the cup really slowly? Which one of those is more effective, right? And I think for teaching people, it's very similar.
There's a story that I really like from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that somebody came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe in Crown Heights, a rabbi, and said, Rebbe, I'm so proud of myself. I just had a Rosh Hashanah service with 50 or 100 or 200, however many Jews with no connection to Judaism. And the Rebbe looked at him and stopped him and said, you go back and you tell those Jews that they do have a connection to Judaism, because there's no such thing as a Jew that has zero connection to Judaism. You're right, of course, that the age of chinuch, the age of education, is 3 years old. And that's the age that we need to be starting to educate our kids. But it's never too late. It's never too late. There's no such, we're not working from zero. We're working from, at the very least, they call it the Pintel Yid in Yiddish, the Nefesh Eloki, the godly soul, this internalized, immutable, inherent Jewish identity that's within every Jew, no matter how small, the Nitzotz, as Rav calls it. That's what we're working from at the very, very worst case scenario, that great spark. And that's what we need to be tapping into with Jewish consciousness, because everything flows from that. Israel, that's what I said to start the show. Israel's not just a country, and it's not just a land, it's a people, and it's a substance, it's a Torah. And they're all connected, and they all stem from this Pintel Yid, this Nefesh Eloki, this Nitzotz, this spark within every Jew.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think-
Well put. No question about it. That's why we gotta, you're on campus. Your job is to reach out to as many Jewish students and elevate them, get them to see it, stand up, because we have the truth. We're a small people. We have the truth. There's nothing. We don't have to feel intimidated at all. We have to say it, and that's it.
Yeah, no,
It's
I
tough.
agree.
Look,
Right?
it's tough, man. It's really
Yeah,
tough.
no
I
kidding.
wouldn't.
But
Yeah.
you know what? We have no choice. That's it. I'm no big fan of the Ukraine, and the reason is I'm no big fan of Russia, but the Ukraine. I have relatives who are buried in a mass grave in the Ukraine from the Holocaust, and you know the Jews tried to fit in before the Holocaust in society, and didn't work. They murdered us, and so many Jews got their heads together and they said, Israel, that's it. Got to establish Israel, and we have to fight for our right to exist because it doesn't matter at the end of the day whether you're nice to whatever country you're in, and you should be nice anything, that's fine. But at the end of the day, it's Israel. Whether you want to, like the Ukrainian Jews today, they're leaving literally, if they're lucky, with a suitcase. Uh, we have an opportunity now to leave with our belongings or to have a foot in both societies. No problem. But we have to decide. We have to do what's right. And when I say we have no choice because that's the message of the Holocaust. You try and fit in, they still come for you. Why did Theodor Herzl write the book, The Jewish State? Because he saw the Dreyfus trial. It was blatant anti-Semitism. And Theodor Herzl was all for assimilating until he saw the Dreyfus trial. And then he wrote the book, Jewish State, and the rest is history. We might as well enjoy what it means to be Jewish then.
Well, furthermore, Rabbi Levi Chazan of Yeshivat Harayon, Kahana's Yeshiva, he has this great chiddush from last week or a couple of weeks ago. We said if you're a Jew with emunah, if you're a Jew, a faithful Jew, according to Rambam's principles of faith, you believe in Mashiach. You believe that in the kibbutz galuyot, in the reconciliation of the exiles of the Jewish people in Israel. If you're a faithful Jew, you believe that it's inevitable that you are going to be in Israel. The question is not if, it's how. Are you going to come in a 747 in first class and business class with all your materials, with your bank accounts, with your jewelry, with everything? Or are you going to come in a cargo plane with a t-shirt on your back and whatever you can fit in your pockets?
Yeah, listen, 100%. And that's why I'm at the airport here, and I'm going to scout out the land, do the best I can, finding the right place for my family in Israel when I'm there. And Ron, we're waiting for you. We're going to go out for steak together when you arrive.
Absolutely. Listen, Israel is home. It's always home. I mean, I'm a transported Israeli, and somebody asks where I'm at. I'm in Winnipeg and Manitoba, but Israel's always going to be home. It's the soul of who I am. It's the breath of who I am. It's the air I breathe. And I believe we all have a reason why we are where we are at the time that we are there. And, and we need to do what's right when we do that. And my time here in Canada has been spent on educating, defending, protecting, and influencing when it comes to everything to do with Judaism and Israel. Back down from nobody, back down from no challenge, and always there to defend, protect, and talk about how great Israel is and the Jewish people are. I want to talk to about one thing that Jesse said, and I agree with you, Jesse, that every Jew has a spark in them. And the question is, how do you light that spark into a fire? And who lights that spark and who gets to that spark first? Because many of the independent Jewish voices people believe that they have a Jewish spark in them too, and that Jewish spark is about fixing the world. And they think by doing what they're doing, they're trying to fix the world. And they use that as an influence on some younger Jews as well. So yes, we all have that spark, but it's just who gets to that spark first, and how do we light that spark, and how do we make sure, like Meir said at the beginning, that that fire that is burning, is burning all the time, Meir, and I think that's very, important, from the Parsha you talked about. We all need to have that fire in us. We're all sacrificing something when we do what we're doing. We're all sacrificing something for Hashem. We're all sacrificing something for the state of Israel and for the Jewish people. How do we make sure that that fire stays, lit all the time?
Well, it's true, of course, that Tikkun Olam is a huge focus of Judaism.
1 second, guys. Keep talking. He just called my name.
Yeah.
1 second.
Well, in Halevi, we said Tikkun Olam, but a lot of people forget the second half of the phrase, the Tikkun Olam, the Malchut Shaddai, to fix the world, not in abortion on demand and gay marriage, not in a vague sense, but specifically in the kingdom of Hashem. So that's not something where you could just fill in the blank, and it does mean something specific. It means our people. It means our Torah.
I agree with you. And that's the point I'm trying to make. You're very educated. You understand in it. But how many other Jewish students come into university? They don't have that background. So when they tell you Tikkun Olam, when they use those words, what does it mean to them? Do they know the history of it? How are they getting pulled and pushed? And you get pulled one way or the other, depending on the amount of education you have about the subject matter. And that's really all that I'm trying to raise here, is we need to have more people like yourself in our universities throughout, Canada, United States, that have that knowledge that you have, that have the leadership that you have, that are able to go out there and bring those Jewish students together and light that spark that you're talking about. Because I agree with you. Once you light that spark, you've got that person forever. But you got to find a way to light that spark. And too many Jewish students are left without having anybody to be there to light that spark for them, because even at home and in their prior education, they didn't have anybody to do it.
Around the world, there's a lot of fakeness, a lot of fake people, a lot of fake ideas, a lot of it. It seems like whenever anybody says anything, it's never a thing. It's always I think, I feel, and I think. When people are confronted by the truth, and when we say Tikkun Olam actually means this, the Malchut Shaddai, it doesn't mean vagueness, it doesn't mean abortion on demand, it doesn't mean gay marriage, it means the Malchut Shaddai. People respond to that, people recognize that. People are so starved for something real and something true and something simple, is true and simple. And when they see it, I think they recognize it, a latch onto it.
I agree.
Initiative here, we've been having a lot of guys start putting on tefillin every day, and it says the rabbis say tefillin strikes fear in the hearts of the enemies of the Jewish people. And you think, what, a box on your arm, a box on your head? Like, what's so scary about that? It's not literally the boxes and the leather, but it's the idea that you have a Jewish people that are united together and under Torah and for Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah, no, I agree. Listen, I think why Ryan is so successful in what Ryan does is because Ryan is authentic. He's truthful. There's no BSing with Ryan. There's no, reading between the lines with him. Ryan is sincere. He's got a background about him that gives him credibility. We need more people like him. We need more people like you that can go out and be those influencers, for us and for the next generation that's coming to university. I'm worried about my son. I'm worried about where he's going to go to university. Where do you send him? Where do you send him? Where you have at least, you can go to bed at night and not worry about, the apartheid week or about BDS or about him, walking around with a Magen David or whatever it is, and not having to worry about, him having to encounter people who are going to challenge him for being Jewish and for being Israeli. It's a worry, because what kind of education can you really get when you're walking around the whole time looking behind your back, worrying about whether your professor is going to give you a good grade or not, depending if you toe the line with what they're saying or not? That's not a real education. That's not a real way to move forward in the world, to get better in the world.
Well, I think like what Jesse said earlier, like I think you have to try and find a place like Jesse, you said that your university, actually there's a good strong Jewish community there. I mean, that's something that parents are going to have to start looking at. I mean, I've been to universities. Like, I actually had some New York Jews tell me that Columbia was a great university for Jewish kids, and it's one of the most anti-Semitic campuses in America. So, I mean, I guess it really just depends on your personal experience on how visible you're willing to be and how vocal.
Yeah. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, unfortunately. And
I
not too
forget
many
who said
people are
it.
vocal.
I forgot who said this exactly. It might have been the right, but survivalist Judaism doesn't survive. If your entire frame of mind in Judaism is just, I need to persist, it's not going to work out, because Jews, we don't serve to persist. We persist to serve. It needs to be not just a survivalist, but actually something goal oriented. It can't just be a little shelter and encampment. It needs to actually be something that's focused on aspirations. Our aspirations, right? And the same thing with the state of Israel. The state of Israel can't just be a Jewish refugee camp, a Jewish shelter. It needs to actually also be a vehicle for our national aspirations towards L'Taken Olam Malchut Shaddai. That's the goal. That's where we need to be going.
I'm in on that.
I think Meir is muted.
Yeah,
Number
Meir,
9
muted.
in the world in terms of being the half country in the world. It's number 9. You know, with all the negative from all these anti-Israel groups, BDS groups, you know, somehow Israel is number 9 in the world in terms of the happiest place to be. And not only that, but somehow Israel also has taken the lead and has won the trust of the world to actually act as the mediator between Russia and the Ukraine. Little tiny Israel is the mediator to try to bring peace to the world.
I thought just for a minute, but just wait in here for a second while you're talking about the happiest country in the world. This is the 2022 report, and this is a list of all the countries which are ranked. And just for the BDS anti-Semites out there, no, this is not done by a bunch of Jews, as I'm sure you're going to accuse us right away, and it's done by Zionists, or some Jews paid for it, or the capitalist Jews, paid for it, or on the other hand, the socialist Jews made it happen. This is who made the study. This is people from Vancouver School of Economics, London School of Economics, Columbia University, which, as we already said, is certainly not a pro-Jewish university, Oxford, Simon Fraser University, KDS School of Public Policy, and this is all the countries listed, right? And here's Israel. You see over to your left. Right there is Israel. And the only countries that manage to outrank it are the Scandinavian countries. And think about it. If you have the same great-grandparents, you all have blonde hair, blue eyes, go to the same church, it's pretty easy to be happy. Israel's not like that. They've got 2 million Arabs, they've got Christians, they got atheists, they got agnostics, and the people surveyed weren't just Jewish Israelis, they were Israelis. So I thought that's a really important point to bring out, that we're not top 10 out of 20 countries, we're the top 10 out of this entire list, and the factors which were brought into being included the gross domestic product, the social support, life expectancy, freedom to make choices, generosity, and the perception of corruption. So thanks for letting me get my 2 words in, and I'll give it back to you guys.
It's pretty amazing.
If you looked at the list, you know who ended up at number 122? The Palestinian territories. At 122, way down at the bottom there somewhere is the Palestinian territories. Tells you a lot about happiness, and the happiness in Israel doesn't just come from the Jewish people who live in Israel. It comes from all of the citizens, Arabs and Jews and the Muslims, Christians alike. So there you have it. It says something about Israel vis-a-vis the Palestinian Authority, and how the Palestinians themselves see their own leadership and the corruption that is Hamas and the PA. Quite interesting. Actually.
Excellent point.
There's a lot of countries that are very happy because they're carefree. You think about the cultures in Northern Europe, very carefree, almost I'd say hedonistic cultures. But Israel's happy because they care deeply. You look at what just happened today with the funeral of Rav Kanievsky. One out of every 9 citizens attended his funeral. Think about that. With any other country where over 10% of its citizens attend a funeral, and it wasn't a pop star, it wasn't a movie star, it wasn't even a politician. It was a person who every moment of his life studied Torah.
But unlike I have to say one thing. I'm not a religious person, but if you read anything about the rabbi, may his name be blessed. You find out, unlike many other rabbis, he was really a down-to-earth person. He never left Israel. He served in the army. You can see photos of him when he waits for the buses. He was a normal guy, very approachable, very, just an amazing person, not just as a rabbi, but as a symbol of what it means to be a mensch, what it means to be Jewish, what it means to love your neighbor, what it means to love your neighbor, no matter if they're religious or not. All those important things that make you, he was a great man, and he's really a real big loss to Israel from a perspective of leadership, and somebody was able to bridge that divide, and that sometimes caused a lot of rift within Israel. Is a great loss to Israel as a whole. So just want to mention that he was a great rabbi.
Absolutely,
really a great rabbi. And
listen,
Meir,
we've been on for close to an hour, and my flight is I got to start checking in also. I'm here at the terminal. I'm pretty excited about it. But listen, let's go with final words from everyone also, and then we'll conclude. So let's start with Jesse. Jesse, final message you want to say?
I'm called an optimist by a lot of people. I like to think I'm a realist, but a lot of people call me an optimist. And I'm really hoping that this heat of this hate, the heat of hate, is going to thaw the coldness of antipathy. I think it was Elie Wiesel who said the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And unfortunately, I think even a bigger problem than the hate we experience is a kind of indifference from within that a lot of Jews have. And I hope that the other problem, the hate, will stir Jews from their point of indifference and get them to care, and get them to start to think and start to recognize, like, oh, I know I'm Jewish. I know my parents told me I'm Jewish. I know I go to shul on the high holidays. But what does that really mean? What does that really mean to me in my life, and how I act and how I think and who I associate with? I think that's maybe a transformation with the height of anti-Semitism getting higher. Maybe we see Jewish consciousness get higher as well.
Very good. Very good. Absolutely. Ryan, go ahead. Say something.
Well, like we were talking a little bit here about Israel. Like, one thing I want to say, a couple years ago, I would have said I'm really jealous.
Ryan, when you come to Israel, you know what we're going to eat. You know where.
Well, that's, it's funny because a couple years ago, I would have been jealous. The second you told me you're going to Israel, I would have been jealous. Now I'm just happy for you. I think it's amazing. I'm glad you're going to get to go. I can't wait till I go, because I got to tell you, it's been, I think, 4 years now, and that's way too long.
Yes.
But I just want to say, I know that there's a lot of stuff out there. Like, there are some good news sources. There's some good websites. Like, Israeli Cool, I think, is amazing. Allgemeiner is solid. I mean, there's the J.ca. I mean, we've got a few, but we got to start pushing them better. I think we have to share them more. I think all of us together, this podcast, we need to try and get these things so more people get a chance to see them, because it's not so much that we're preaching to the choir, because I honestly don't even know that we have a choir. I think sometimes we have a bunch of Jews that are singing the same song, maybe not with the same tune. Sometimes we gotta work a little bit harder, I think, at building those bridges.
Right.
And I gotta tell you, I feel good when I see kids like Jesse. I gotta tell you, thank you, Jesse, because I gotta tell you, man, it's hard out here sometimes. You get involved in this stuff, and you work really hard at it, and you get frustrated because you see the other side is clearly, because they're so emotional about it and they're so virulent. Sometimes it's hard to remember that there are kids like you out there that are on our side, and we do have, we are the resistance. We're the ones that are fighting these people that want to do harm to the Jewish people. So I just want to say thank you for that. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Very good. Ron.
Yes, well, first of all, Meir, to you, I think there's nothing greater than seeing somebody like you getting the opportunity to go to Israel now, with the excitement I see in your smile, your eyes lighting up. You deserve this. Israel deserves you, and you deserve Israel. And I'm giddy with happiness for you, for this trip, and for your hopefully aliyah in not too distant a future. Jesse, you are that spark that we all needed today, man. I'm telling you, you are amazing. I don't know you personally, but just from the way you spoke and the devotion you have, we need more of you in every university. If we could somehow photocopy you and place you at every university, we would be much better than where we are today. So you're a blessing, and thank you very much for letting me share, today with you. And when it comes to BDS, I want to tell you one thing. In Israel, they don't give two whats about it. It doesn't, bother Israelis. They don't even talk about it very often. It's not something going to affect them. When you see the GDP in Israel, when you see the growth of the Israeli economy, when you see the dependency on Israel, when the Ukrainian-Russian war to be a mediator, between Russia and Ukraine, you understand that BDS is not impacting Israel. What's impacting is us here in the diaspora. And that's what we need to focus ourselves on, protecting our own children and make sure that they've got the resources and the knowledge to do what Jesse does every day at his university. I want to meet all three of you in Israel together at a nice steakhouse in not too distant future. And together we'll continue to fight a good fight. God bless each and every one of you. God bless the doctor back home. And God bless Am Yisrael and the Jewish people all over the world.
Amen. Well put. Very well put. We have a lot of challenges still, lots of challenges, and we don't back down at all. When I'm in Israel, we'll be doing the podcast live from Israel. I'm very flexible with the time. There's a 7-hour difference between Israel time and Toronto time, but I'll certainly make it work. And I'll have guests on as well from Israel who will join us. Make a lot of connections there. I know people there. It'll be great to have them on. One project that we're going to definitely undertake is organizing against Al Quds Day. And we'll have activities in Israel. We'll have a campaign developed against Al Quds Day, a very powerful, effective campaign with input from Jews like who we have today and others to come on to the show live and have a series of events. That's social media is so important nowadays, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to speak the truth, we're going to spread the truth, and we're going to fight effectively against these vicious anti-Semites. That's exactly what they are. And with the element of taking the lead from Israel. So it'll be fantastic. It'll be great. It's exciting. It's an exciting moment. And it'll be great when you guys come and join me in Israel. We'll get together. We'll have fabulous time. And you know what? Anyways, I don't have to explain it to you. You've been here. You know exactly what it is. We're going to do it together. Does our doctor in the studio have something to add to this as well?
Of course. I thought you never asked. But before that, though, I just wanted to kind of emphasize what Ron was saying about how BDS, he's saying it's not relevant in Israel. Well, Ron, I don't disagree with you often, but BDS is very important in Israel because it stands for Buy Israeli Products, Donate to Israeli Charities, and Support the State of Israel. BDS. So don't forget, BDS, okay? And on that note, let's close with a song. And as you all may realize, I'm down here in South Texas, and we like to look at South Texas like this. We're just the other Lone Star State, okay? We've had both the Alamo and Masada. So on that note, I'm going to play a closing song, and then we'll see you all again soon, but not soon enough.
Perfect.
נפש יהודי הומייה ותן מזרח קדימה עין לציון צופיה עוד לא אבדה תקוותנו תקווה Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol